Welcome to day number 6. Now I've been waiting for these two parcels to turn up. This is the missing toilet seat and this is the fixing brackets for the WC pan to fix to the actual bracket. These were missing out of the box, so the manufacturer has sent them to me in the post. So as usual, before we get on with it, shall we see where we're up to? So let's see what we got then. So I've had that for most of the day and I did that cleaning up. The bracket is immense. Oh my word! That. Now the first task I need to do is cut a notch out here in the top of the wood, because the wood is stopping the tap connector getting onto the connection for the float valve, because it's actually at the top here. So I'm using my multi-tool now just to cut out a notch. Now my notch is complete, I should be able to get my bent tap connector onto this isolation valve, which feeds the float operated valve. Now the cold feed is done to the toilet. All we're going to do now is turn it on and test it doesn't leak. Now it's time to get this OSB board ready for going on the front of the boxing in. Now I didn't use ply in the end because it was just far too expensive. So I thought I would try the OSB board to see if it worked just as good. I could have actually used weddy board as well, but I decided to go for this. So I'm preparing the holes now. For this one I'm doing is the flush pipe. I've just done the 2 holes for the bolts where they go through, and then I've got the biggest one where the pan connector comes through to do yet, which I'm doing now. So I'm putting a big hole through, and then I will use my jigsaw to cut the rest of the hole out. Now another reason for me using the OSB board instead of marine ply is, well, they say OSB is actually twice as strong as marine ply, but obviously it's not as waterproof as marine ply. Once I've tiled on top of it, hopefully it's strong enough so this toilet doesn't squeak. This next one I'm cutting out is the access into the flush valve or the float valve. So hopefully when I put this board over the top, it's in the right place. If not, it might need a few tweaks. So basically I've cut out 4 holes into the corners, and now I'm just using my jigsaw to cut along the lines to cut out this rectangle. And a little tip for you, when you're using a jigsaw, always wait for the blade to stop before you actually pull out the blade. Now the OSB is attached to the boxing in and the holes are cut in both pieces of wood, I can now start looking at fixing this toilet temporary. Remember, I've put another piece of OSB on front of the back piece to act as a temporary tile, just to give me the thickness of cutting the pipes, so I don't have to cut the pipes twice. Now the first pipe I'm going to cut is the flush pipe. So the first measurement I need is this one, where the wood and the flush pipe actually meet each other. So I've got a flat surface here, so I'm using my saw, I've got my Sharpie pen, and I'm just going to mark where the wall and the pipe meet. Now I've placed the flush pipe onto the toilet and I'm doing exactly the same thing again, make my second mark. Now you can see the difference between the two marks is 75 millimeters. So what I need to do now is cut 75 millimeters off this right hand side end. Not the left end, because that's where the rubber grommet goes for going into the pan. And that'd mess me up if I cut that side. So to make it easier for me to cut it, the first thing I did was use some tape around the marks so I could see quite easily where the marks were, and then I've placed the flush pipe into the pan so it will hold it at one end for me, and I can just use my wood saw now to cut straight through the plastic. Some guys will probably use plastic pipe cutters for this, but I wanted to show you this way in case you haven't got plastic pipe cutters. And then I have to do exactly the same process again with the toilet pan flush pipe. This time I need to cut 40 millimeters off this pipe. And again, I've connected the pan connector to the actual pan to make it easier for me to cut it. And because this plastic pipe is going into a rubber seal, we've got to make sure we file it really well on the outside of the pipe, but also make sure you file it on the inside, because you don't want any toilet paper sticking to the inside of the pan and blocking the toilet. And now what's left to do now is lube up the actual connector and push the pipe on, which is easier said than done. Now these are the clips that the manufacturer sent me for getting the pan connector to go onto the actual frame, and you use this grub screw here to fasten the pan onto the actual screwed rod. Now to put these clips on the pan, the first thing I need to do is slide it through here and line up the grub screw with this hole here, because this is where we're going to put the Allen key in to tighten up the grub screw. Once I've got that in line, I can then use this plastic screw, or the second part of this clip, to hold it onto the pan. So you just basically screw these two parts in together. There's a male and female part. Then you need to use a little key to tighten it up. So again, use the Allen key to get it in the right position and hold it in the right position, and then you use this little plastic key what comes in the kit to be able to tighten up this male part of the connector. Now don't do it too tight, but it has to be tight enough so it doesn't move. If you do it too tight, you end up stripping the thread. I wonder why I know that. Next thing is cutting this screwed rod down to the right length. So you can see here, when I've screwed on these clips, I've got just under 2 inches, around about 50 mil, it's about 48 mil I think, of screwed rod left. So I need to cut off that length off each piece of screwed rod. Now what I've done here first is screw a nut all the way down to the end, or the closest bit to the OSB board, before I started cutting off the screwed rod, and that is going to help me then to be able to keep the thread clean and clear, so when I come to screw these metal brackets on. You'll see what I mean in a minute when I actually do get through this screwed rod. And to make this work properly, you have to cut right the way through the rod. You don't try and snap the last bit off, because it puts a lip onto the thread and stops you screwing any nuts on. So all I need to do now is unscrew this nut, and it should give me a nice clean thread to be able to screw on this bracket without having to file it. Let's see if it works. And as you can see, it slips on incredibly easy, and I just need to screw this all the way down to the OSB. And then it's just a matter of doing exactly the same thing on the other side. And finally, it's time to get this pan onto the bolts and the connectors and the brackets. So line it up and push it on, making sure you've sprayed everything with silicone grease first to make it a lot easier to get it on. Finally, it's time for testing. So inside here is an isolation valve for the float valve. So I'm just turning this on now and letting the cistern fill up. Now I've actually left the left hand side of this boxing open, so when I do flush the toilet I'll be able to check the pan connector and the flush pipe aren't leaking, and I'll also be able to check that the actual soil pipe where I've connected it on with the socket isn't leaking. So here you can see the float valve on the right hand side where the flexi pipe's connected to. There's the isolation valve, and this red thing is the flush buttons. So the white and blue buttons are the full flush or the half flush, depending if you're doing a number 1 or a number 2. And now it's full, it's time to flush and test. Now the temporary toilet pan's in, what I want to do now is I want to get the bath in and just make sure it fits. And also what I want to do is I want to get the measurements off the bath so I can put the foot plate in for the bath panel, which will also help me when I'm filling in the extra floor thickness for the tiles. Now again, we've still not got the tiles yet, so I'm not sure how thick this floor needs to be. One of the things I've got in mind is putting some weddy board down first and then putting the tiles on top of that to make up the thickness. But I'll see that once these tiles we get them. So let's go and get the bath out of the garage and let's try it in this gap. Fits like a glove. So the red mark I've made on the floor is actually the end of the bath, so I'll need to come in the thickness of the bath panel there for the wood. You can also see I've made 2 marks on the floor, one there and one there, and that's where I'm going to put 2 pieces of wood going full length across there, and that's where the legs are going to go onto. So I'm not going to put the legs onto this floor, I'm going to screw some wood onto the floor first and then I can fix the legs onto the wood. But first thing I need to do is chisel a bit more of this white tile off there because it's in the way. Now this blue piece of wood I've got here is part of the bath panel, so I'm just using this as a thickness gauge. So I'm putting the front of the blue piece of wood on the line, which allows me then to put my 3x2 in the right location for fixing to the floor, and it's just a matter of screwing it down again with screws and plugs. Now it's time for doing a bit of plumbing again. So this is where the shower's going. So the first thing I need to do is drill 2 holes into this wood. So what I've just done now is drill 2 60mm holes, 150mm centres to allow the pipes to come in for the shower. This piece of wood here, I was hoping I was going to secure the bracket, but I need to put another noggin across here to secure the bracket. Let me show you. So for the shower bar, there's a bracket what goes on there, and if I put that there, and I just misjudged it, so I'm going to have to put another one across there, which is no hardship, and then I can pipe this up. Now what I've already done is I've fixed the bath filler in so I could get my heights. So when I tried the bath in, I could see that the bath filler was in the right place. So what I've got to do now is I've got hot and cold water here, hot and cold water here, and pick up the hot and cold water for the wash basin. So that's the next thing I've got to do, is a bit of plumbing. Oh no, I've got to do that first. So I'll put that noggin in, put those bits of plasterboard back, and then I can start doing some plumbing. So this is the last fitting I've got to solder, which will be supplying the hot water to the bath, the shower and the wash basin. Cold water's already done, so it's just this, the last one to do. And then it's turn on and test, and then hopefully that'll do for tonight. Now that's all the plumbing all finished. So bath filler's all done, piped up, shower's all piped up, wash basin's all done, and that'll do for today. So hopefully you've liked this video, and I'll catch you on day 7. Cheers.